The champagne flute slipped from Vivienne Rothschild's manicured fingers and shattered against the marble floor of the St. Regis ballroom. But the sound was nothing compared to the silence that had descended upon the room. 300 of Manhattan's most powerful elite frozen in a tableau of shock, their eyes darting between Vivienne's alabaster face draining of color and the tall black woman she'd just spent 10 minutes humiliating in front of everyone. Here's what Vivienne didn't know when she cornered what she assumed was the help who'd accidentally bumped into her. Amara Okonkwo wasn't wearing a server's uniform. She was wearing a $30,000 Valentino dress, the same one Vivienne had tried to buy last month, but was told had already been purchased by someone more important. Amara stood there now, phone in hand, having just sent a single text message. One message that would, in exactly 47 seconds, begin complete dismantling of the Rothschild empire. You see, Vivienne Rothschild had everything. A billionaire husband, a fashion empire worth $800 million, homes in 7 countries, and a vicious tongue she wielded like a scalpel against anyone she deemed beneath her, which, in her mind, was everyone, but especially people who looked like Amara. Do you even know who I am? Vivienne had sneered just moments ago, her voice carrying across the charity gala. You people always trying to rise above your station, pretending you belong in places like this. What did you do? Steal that dress? Save up your welfare checks? The room had gasped. Some had pulled out phones to record. Others had looked away in second-hand embarrassment. But Amara had simply smiled, a smile that would haunt Vivienne for the rest of her life. Because Amara Okonkwo wasn't just any CEO. She was a shadow investor behind Jong Industries, the parent company that, through a labyrinth of holdings, owned 60% of Rothschild Enterprises' debt. She was a woman who'd been quietly buying up shares for 3 years, waiting for the perfect moment to make her move. She was also the anonymous philanthropist who donated $50 million to inner-city education, the same donation Vivienne was here tonight to take credit for, not knowing her husband had embezzled it from the charity fund. But most importantly, Amara was someone who'd grown up in the very neighborhoods Vivienne had just insulted. Someone who'd built her empire not on inherited wealth and married money, but on brilliance, determination, and understanding that true power never needs to announce itself. The text Amara had just sent was to her CFO, "Execute Order 66." In boardrooms across the city, phones were lighting up, trading floors were erupting. The hostile takeover 3 years in the making was beginning. Vivienne Rothschild was about to learn that empires built on arrogance and hatred have foundations of sand. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of unveiled prejudice to bring it all crashing down. The 47 seconds were up. Vivienne Rothschild woke that morning in her Park Avenue penthouse the same way she had for the past 15 years, alone in a bed worth more than most people's homes, surrounded by luxury that had long since stopped bringing her joy. Her husband, William, had left for Tokyo 3 days ago. Or was it London? She'd stopped keeping track of his business trips, just as he'd stopped pretending they were anything more than roommates with a joint bank account. Mrs. Rothschild, her assistant Claire, knocked softly. "Your car will be here in 2 hours for the charity gala." The charity gala. Vivienne's lips curved into what passed for a smile these days. Tonight, she would announce her generous donation to the Future Leaders Foundation, $50 million for inner-city education. Never mind that the money had actually come from an anonymous donor who'd requested no recognition. William had convinced the foundation's board to let Vivienne take credit. It was good for the brand. He'd said, everything was always about the brand. Vivienne rose, catching her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. 53 years old, though she told everyone 45. Botox, fillers, and a top surgeon's knife had preserved her beauty, but nothing could fill the emptiness behind her eyes. She'd grown up poor in rural Kentucky, a fact she'd buried beneath years of elocution lessons and carefully crafted lies about Swiss boarding schools. She clawed her way into high society through sheer determination and strategic marriage. William had been her ticket. Old money, new ambitions, and a desperate need for a beautiful wife to complete his image. But somewhere along the way, Vivienne had forgotten where she came from. Or rather, she'd spent so much energy running from it that she'd become the very type of person who'd once looked down on her. "Claire," she called out, Make sure they have the proper security tonight. I don't want any undesirable elements slipping in. You know how these charity events attract people trying to social climb. Claire paused. Ma'am, it's a fundraiser for underprivileged youth. There will be scholarship recipients attending. Then make sure they're clearly identified. I don't want to waste time talking to people who don't matter. As Claire left, Vivienne turned back to her mirror, not seeing the bitter lines that no amount of surgery could erase. She saw power. She saw success. She saw someone who'd never be poor, powerless, or pitted again. She had no idea that across town, Amara Okonkwo was looking in her own mirror, seeing something entirely different. Purpose. Amara Okonkwo stood in her Tribeca office, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Her reflection in the window showed a woman who'd earned every one of her 45 years. Silver streaks in her natural hair that she wore like a crown, laugh lines that spoke of joy despite hardship, and eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by facades. The Rothschild files, as requested. Her CFO, James Chun, placed a thick folder on her desk. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? Amara turned from the window. I've waited 3 years, James. Ever since I discovered William Rothschild's embezzlement scheme. We could just report it to the authorities and watch him wiggle out with expensive lawyers while inner-city kids lose their funding? Amara shook her head. No, the Rothschilds need to learn what it feels like to lose everything. Only then might they understand what they've taken from others. James studied his boss, the woman who built a billion-dollar empire from a food truck business she'd started at 22. The woman who put herself through Harvard Business School while raising her younger siblings after their parents died. The woman who could buy and sell the Rothschilds 3 times over but chose to live modestly, pouring her wealth into communities that needed it. The hostile takeover is ready, James said. We control 60% of their debt through our shell companies. One word from you, and we can call it all in. They'll have to liquidate everything. Not yet, Amara said, picking up her gown for the evening, a stunning Valentino piece she bought specifically because she'd heard Vivienne wanted it. Petty? Perhaps. But Amara had learned that sometimes the universe provided poetic justice in small packages. You're really going to gala? James asked. I want to look William Rothschild in the eyes when I donate the real $50 million. I want to see if there's any conscience left in him when he realizes I know what he did. And Vivienne? Amara's expression softened slightly. I've researched her background. She came from poverty, too. Sometimes the people who fight hardest to escape their past become the cruelest to those who remind them of it. Maybe there's still something human in her worth saving. James doubted it, but he'd learned not to bet against Amara's instincts. She saw potential in people everyone else had written off. It's what made her dangerous to those who underestimated her, and invaluable to those who earned her loyalty. As Amara prepared for the gala, she thought about the scholarship recipients who would be there tonight. Kids from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens. Kids like she'd once been. Kids that Vivienne Rothschild would probably try to avoid. She had no idea that fate was about to force an encounter that would change everything. The St. Regis Ballroom was a study in excess. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across silk-covered walls, while Manhattan's elite mingled in clothes worth more than most annual salaries. Vivienne entered like a queen surveying her domain, her silver gown catching the light like armor. She made her rounds, air-kissing women she secretly despised, complimenting dresses she found gaudy, all while keeping an eye out for photographers. The announcement of her donation would be the evening's highlight. William was supposed to be here, but he texted something about a delayed flight. Typical. Amara entered quietly through a side door, having deliberately avoided the red carpet. She wasn't here for attention. She was here for truth. She spotted William Rothschild immediately, holding court near the bar, his loud laugh echoing across the room. He looked older, grayer, stress etching lines around his eyes. Good, she thought. Guilty consciences had a way of aging people. She was making her way toward him when it happened. A server carrying champagne turned too quickly, and Amara, trying to avoid the tray, stepped backward directly into Vivienne's path. The collision was minor, barely a bump, but Vivienne's reaction was volcanic. Are you blind? Vivienne's voice cut through the party chatter like a blade. Do you have any idea what this dress costs? Amara turned, apology ready on her lips, but Vivienne was already in full fury. Of course you don't. People like you. Vivienne's eyes raked over Amara, taking in her dark skin, her natural hair, making assumptions that revealed more about Vivienne than she realized. This is what happens when they lower standards, when they let anyone in. You people always trying to rise above your station. The room was beginning to notice. Conversation stopped. Phones appeared. I'm sorry for bumping into you, Amara said calmly. It was an accident. An accident? Vivienne laughed, ugly and sharp. Like you accidentally got in here? What did you do? Steal that dress? Save up your welfare checks? Or did you sleep your way onto the guest list? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even in a room full of people with their own prejudices, Vivienne had crossed a line. William Rothschild pushed through the crowd, his face pale. Vivienne. Don't, William. I'm so tired of pretending these people belong here. They should be grateful we're raising money for them, not pretending to be equals. That's when Amara smiled. That small, knowing smile that would haunt Vivienne forever. You're right, Amara said softly. I should be grateful. After all, you're donating $50 million to help kids like I used to be, aren't you? Vivienne lifted her chin. Yes, I am. My generosity will change lives. Your generosity, Amara repeated, pulling out her phone. Tell me, Mrs. Rothschild, where exactly did that $50 million come from? William's face went from pale to ghostly. Who are you? I'm Amara Okonkwo, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm the anonymous donor who gave that $50 million. The money your husband embezzled into your accounts to make you look charitable while keeping the tax benefits. The silence was deafening. You're lying, Vivienne whispered, but her voice cracked. Am I? Amara held up her phone, showing bank transfer records. I'm also the CEO of Quantum Holdings, which owns Zhang Industries, which controls 60% of your company's debt through various subsidiaries. I've spent 3 years documenting every fraudulent transaction, every embezzled dollar, every tax shelter. She typed something quickly on her phone. I just instructed my CFO to call in all your debts. You have 48 hours to pay $500 million. Since I know you don't have it liquid, you'll have to sell everything. Your homes, your cars, your company, everything. Vivienne's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to break the spell, holding the room frozen. You can't. This is illegal, William sputtered. Calling in legal debts? Hardly. Amara's voice remained calm. Embezzlement, however, is very illegal. The FBI will be interested in my documentation. Vivienne's legs gave out. She would have fallen if William hadn't caught her arm, but she yanked away from him, fury replacing shock. You did this, she screamed at her husband. You said the money was from offshore investments. Vivienne, not here. Not here? Not here. Her voice rose to a shriek. You destroyed us for what? To make me look charitable? To get a tax break? The crowd pressed closer, phones recording everything. Tomorrow, this would be on every social media platform, every gossip site, every news channel. The Rothschilds, who'd built their brand on superiority and exclusivity, were destroying each other in public. But Amara wasn't watching them. She was looking at the young scholarship recipients who'd shrunk against the walls when Vivienne had started her tirade. Kids who dressed in their best clothes, excited to attend their first gala, only be reminded that some people would never see them as equals. Can I have everyone's attention? Amara called out. The room turned to her. The Future Leaders Foundation will still receive its donation, the real $50 million, not the stolen funds the Rothschilds claimed. But more than that, she walked over to the scholarship recipients, a group of 7 teenagers trying to disappear into the wallpaper. These young people are the real VIPs tonight. Marcus Williams. She pointed to a young black man, graduated valedictorian, and is headed to MIT. Sophia Rodriguez, a young Latina, stepped forward shyly, won the National Science Fair, and has a full ride to Stanford. David Chun, An Asian teenager nodded. Build an app that helps homeless people find shelters and resources. She went through all 7, listing their achievements, their dreams, their potential. The crowd began applauding, tentatively at first, then with genuine enthusiasm. This is what the future looks like, Amara said. Brilliant, diverse, and unstoppable. And anyone who can't see that is living in the past. Vivienne stood frozen, watching this black woman command the room she thought was hers, watching the undesirable elements being celebrated while she was pitted or scorned. Her entire worldview was crumbling as fast as her empire. Vivienne, William hissed, we need to leave, now. But Vivienne wasn't listening. She was staring at Amara, and for the first time in decades, really seeing the power that came from lifting others up instead of stepping on them, seeing the respect earned rather than demanded, seeing what she could have been if she hadn't let fear and hatred consume her. I was poor once, Vivienne said suddenly, her voice hollow. Everyone turned to her. In Kentucky, my father was a drunk. My mother cleaned houses. I wore hand-me-downs and got free lunch at school. William grabbed her arm. Vivienne, stop. I hated it, she continued, pulling away from him. I hated being pitted. I hated being powerless. So I became someone else. Someone worse than the people who looked down on me. She looked at the scholarship kids. I became a monster I once feared. The room held its breath. Was this remorse? Manipulation? A breakdown? The next 48 hours were a blur of destruction. The video of Vivienne's racist tirade went viral within hours, followed immediately by news of the embezzlement scandal. By morning, 3 major fashion houses had severed ties with Vivienne's clothing line. By afternoon, the FBI had frozen the Rothschild accounts pending investigation. By evening, protesters were outside their penthouse demanding justice. William tried damage control, but it was like trying to hold back the ocean with his hands. Every hour brought new revelations: tax fraud, wage theft at Vivienne's factories, bribes to city officials. Amara's 3 years of investigation had been thorough. Vivienne sat in her penthouse, watching her empire crumble on the news. Her phone rang constantly, lawyers, publicists, former friends distancing themselves. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she found herself thinking about Amara's words, about those kids at the gala, about the person she'd become. She thought about her mother, who died still cleaning houses, never knowing her daughter had become wealthy. Vivienne had been too ashamed to visit, too afraid poverty was contagious. On the second day, Claire, her assistant, quit via text. The household staff stopped showing up. William packed a bag. Where are you going? Vivienne asked. Switzerland. I have accounts they can't touch. Come if you want, but make it quick. We're just going to run? What else is there? We're finished here. But we can start over. Buy new identities, rebuild slowly. Vivienne looked at her husband, really looked at him, saw the man who'd stolen from children's charities without remorse, who was ready to run rather than face consequences, who'd help her build a life on lies and contempt. No, she said quietly. What? I'm not running. I did this. I became this. Maybe it's time to face it. William laughed bitterly. Face it? You'll go to prison. You'll lose everything. I've already lost everything that mattered. I lost it years ago when I decided being rich was more important than being human. William left without another word. Vivienne wasn't surprised. Their marriage had been a business arrangement dressed up as love. Another lie in a life built on them. That evening, as the sun set over Manhattan, Vivienne did something she hadn't done in years. She called her sister in Kentucky, the one she pretended didn't exist. Viv! Mary's voice was shocked. Is it really you? Yeah, Mary. It's me. I need to tell you something. I need to tell you I'm sorry. 2 weeks later, Amara Okonkwo stood in the empty Rothschild penthouse. The auction had been that morning. Everything sold to pay debts and fines. She bought the place herself, planning to convert it into affordable housing for young professionals starting their careers in the city. She found Vivienne in what had been her closet, a room larger than most apartments, now empty except for 2 suitcases. The FBI? Amara asked, "Tomorrow morning, I'm turning myself in. My lawyer says I'll get 3 to 5 years if I cooperate fully." Vivienne's face was different without the makeup, the procedures, the armor of wealth. She looked older, but somehow more real. You could have run with William. To become someone even worse? No. Vivienne picked up one of the suitcases. "I called my sister. She says I can stay with her when I get out. Maybe learn who I was supposed to be before I got lost." They stood in silence for a moment, two women from poverty who'd taken very different paths. "Why did you really do it?" Vivienne asked. "You could have just reported us quietly. Why the public destruction?" Amara considered the question. Because quiet justice is often no justice at all. Because those kids at the gala needed to see that racism and cruelty have consequences. Because the world needed to see that black women like me aren't victims. We're forces of nature when pushed too far. And me? Am I beyond redemption? That's not for me to decide. But recognizing what you become is the first step to becoming something else. Vivienne nodded, understanding more in that moment than she had in 53 years of life. The charity, the real one, I want to leave it something. You have nothing left to leave. I have time. When I get out, I'll have time. Maybe I could volunteer, teach kids about how not to lose yourself climbing the ladder. Amara studied her, looking for manipulation, finding only exhaustion and perhaps the beginning of genuine remorse. The Future Leaders Foundation accepts volunteers who pass background checks and shown genuine commitment to change. Amara said carefully, "In 3 to 5 years, if you've truly changed, we'll see." As Vivienne left the penthouse for the last time, she turned back to Amara. "That night, when you smiled after I insulted you, you already knew everything, didn't you? You could have destroyed me any time." "Yes." "So why then? Why that moment?" "Because you showed those kids who you really were. And they needed to see that people like you don't win anymore. That their futures aren't determined by the prejudices of the past." Vivienne nodded, understanding finally that her empire hadn't collapsed because of Amara's text. It had been crumbling from the inside for years, rotted by hatred and lies. Amara had simply revealed what was already broken. The community center in the Bronx was bustling with activity. Kids ran through the halls, heading to coding classes, art workshops, college prep sessions. The Future Leaders Foundation had expanded dramatically, funded by the profitable conversion of former luxury properties into affordable housing. Amara walked through the center, greeting students and teachers, checking on the progress of the new wing they were building. She stopped at the volunteer coordination office, where a woman with graying hair and simple clothes was teaching resume writing to a group of high school seniors. Vivienne looked up, catching Amara's eye through the window. She looked nothing like the imperious woman from the gala 5 years ago. Prison had taken the last of her pretense, and the 2 years since her release had been spent in therapy, community service, and slowly rebuilding a relationship with the sister she'd abandoned. She didn't ask for forgiveness anymore. She'd learned that forgiveness was earned through action, not words. Every day, she showed up. Every day, she helped kids who reminded her of who she'd once been, poor, ambitious, and desperate to be seen as valuable. "Ms. V," one of the students called out, "You really went to prison?" "I did," Vivienne answered honestly. "I hurt people and stole money meant for communities like yours. Prison was the consequence. But you changed. I'm trying to. Every day, I'm trying to be better than I was yesterday." "That's all any of us can do," the student said philosophically, returning to his resume. Later, as the center was closing, Amara found Vivienne cleaning up the classroom. "The kids like you," Amara observed, "they don't know who I used to be. They know who you are now. That matters more." Vivienne paused in her cleaning. "Do you ever regret destroying my life?" "I didn't destroy your life. I revealed what you'd built it on. There's a difference." "Yes," Vivienne agreed. "There is." They worked in comfortable silence. Two women who'd learned that empires built on hatred always fall, but sometimes from ruins, something better can grow. Outside, the Bronx streets were alive with possibility. Kids who'd once been written off were heading home with homework and hope. The Future Leaders Foundation had provided opportunity, but more importantly, It had provided proof that the old prejudices, the old power structures, were crumbling. Marcus Williams, the MIT graduate Amara had highlighted at the gala, had just sold his first patent for $10 million. He'd immediately donated half to the foundation. Sophia Rodriguez was in her third year at Stanford, researching cancer treatments. David Chen's app had gone national, helping thousands of homeless individuals find resources. They were the future Vivienne had once tried to deny, thriving despite, or perhaps because of, the spectacular collapse of her empire of arrogance. The St. Regis Ballroom hosted another charity gala, this one for the Future Leaders Foundation's 5th anniversary. Amara stood at the podium, looking out at a crowd that had changed dramatically. More diverse faces, younger entrepreneurs, people who'd earned their wealth through innovation rather than inheritance. 5 years ago, in this room, someone told me I didn't belong. Amara began. That people like me were trying to rise above our station. She was wrong about the first part. I belonged here as much as anyone, but she was right about the second. I was trying to rise above my station. We all should be. The crowd murmured agreement. Rising above doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. It means lifting others as you climb. It means using power to empower. It means remembering that empires built on stepping on others will always fall, but communities built on lifting each other up can last forever. In the back of the room, wearing a simple black dress she'd bought secondhand, Vivienne stood with the other volunteers. She wasn't hiding. She'd learned to face the consequences of her past. Several people recognized her, whispering, pointing. She stood straight, accepting their judgment. She'd earned it. But a few of the scholarship recipients she'd tutored came to stand with her, a protective circle of kids who'd learned that redemption was possible, that people could change, that sometimes the greatest teachers were those who'd failed the most spectacularly. Amara saw this from the stage and nodded slightly. Justice had been served. The empire had fallen, but in its place, something unexpected had grown. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of it. Not redemption completed, but redemption in progress. The gala continued into the night, but the real victory wasn't in the donations raised or the deals made. It was in the proof that power derived from prejudice was ultimately powerless against truth, that empires built on hate were castles of sand, and that sometimes, just sometimes, even the most arrogant could learn humility. Vivienne Rothschild's empire had collapsed in 47 seconds, brought down by a text message and her own cruelty. But it had taken 5 years to build something from those ruins. Not a new empire, but a foundation for others to build upon. And in the end, that was the greatest justice of all. That from the ashes of arrogance, opportunity could grow. That where privilege had once stood, potential now flourished. That a black woman's dignity had proven more powerful than a billionaire's spite. The champagne flute that had shattered 5 years ago had been the beginning of an ending, but also the ending of a beginning. And in that space between, in that moment of shattering, the future had rushed in, diverse, brilliant, and absolutely unstoppable.